Hi, I'm the woman they abandoned at a remote mountain cabin with no car, no phone reception, and no way back. My brother and cousins claimed it was just a lesson in self-reliance. But being left alone in freezing temperatures wasn't the worst part. It was discovering they'd orchestrated it all, that they'd been undermining me for years. And when I finally made it back to civilization, I didn't just survive, I thrived. Within 24 hours, I had leveraged everything I owned to buy the family. Business they thought I didn't understand. And by sunrise, I had signed the termination papers for everyone who left me behind. Would you have done the same if it was your own blood who betrayed you? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Eliza Chen, the youngest of 4 siblings, the quiet one with the finance degree nobody respected, the one who always stayed late at the office while others took the credit, the one who never questioned the family hierarchy. That's how it's always been. At business meetings, strategy sessions, even family dinners, they called it humility. I used to call it survival. This annual retreat to our grandfather's mountain property was supposed to be different. A chance to finally be heard, Reed had said, sending me a spreadsheet of projected company growth with the comment, "We need your input this year." The family business, Chen Innovations, had been struggling with the transition to sustainable technology, and for once, my environmental finance expertise seemed relevant. It looked promising on paper, but paper burns easily in mountain fireplaces. From the first evening at the cabin, I felt the familiar chill that had nothing to do with the October mountain air. That feeling of being tolerated rather than included. My siblings talked over me during dinner strategy sessions. My cousins exchanged glances when I suggested modernizing our investment portfolio. I attributed it to old habits. Maybe they needed time to see me differently. Maybe I needed to speak louder. Reed, my oldest brother and CEO since our father's retirement, commanded attention without effort. His voice carried across rooms like it was born to be heard. My sister Vivian, head of marketing, could charm investors with a single anecdote. My brother Marcus handled operations with ruthless efficiency. Then there was me, the youngest, the afterthought, the one who handled special projects that never seemed to make the annual report. The final night, we gathered in the great room. A fire crackled in the stone hearth while snow fell silently outside, coating the pines in white. Reed was presenting next year's strategy, standing tall in his custom flannel that somehow still looked like a business suit on his frame. The others lounged on leather furniture, tablets and whiskey in hand, nodding at appropriate intervals. "The future of Chen Innovations," Reed announced, "lies in doubling down on traditional manufacturing while exploring minimal green initiatives for the press releases." He clicked to the next slide. "We'll allocate 2% of revenue to sustainable research purely for tax advantages." I cleared my throat. The room didn't pause. "Actually," I said, louder this time, "I've analyzed the market trends. Companies pivoting to sustainability are seeing triple the growth rate. We could transition 60% of our operations in 18 months and qualify for federal grants that would offset most costs." The room fell silent, not the good kind of silent, the kind where you can hear the judgment crackling louder than the fire. Reed smiled tightly. "That's a cute academic perspective, Liz, but this isn't business school. This is reality." "I've been working in environmental finance for 8 years, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I've helped 3 Fortune 500 companies transition, successfully." "At a consulting firm," Marcus interjected, "where you didn't have to implement anything. You just made pretty PowerPoints and collected fees." Vivian sighed dramatically. "Can we please stick to viable strategies? Dad's legacy deserves better than experimental green fantasies." I felt heat rise to my cheeks. Not from embarrassment, but from a slow-building anger I'd suppressed for too long. Dad's legacy is innovation. It's in our company name. and right. Now we're falling behind because we're afraid to evolve. Reed's expression hardened. You want to talk about Dad's legacy? The legacy he entrusted to me? The company I've kept profitable while you've been playing with spreadsheets and recycled paper? I've been developing expertise that could save this company, I replied, standing now. The market is shifting. Our competitors are adapting. We're losing contracts because clients want sustainable partners. We lost the Westridge contract because you insisted on including your green energy proposal against my direct instructions, Reed snapped. I blinked. What? They specifically requested sustainable options. They requested them to check a box, not to implement them, Reed said. I had to do damage control after you left the meeting. Fortunately, they were understanding when I explained. You were just our diversity hire, the environmentalist little sister we humor. The room went silent. My cousins stared at their drinks. Vivian examined her manicure. Marcus actually smirked. Diversity hire? I repeated, my voice barely audible. Is that how you present me to clients? Reed shrugged. What does it matter how I frame it? The point is, you've never understood how this business actually works. Dad gave you a position out of obligation, not merit. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. 8 years of suppressed frustration crystallized in that moment. Dad gave me a position because I graduated top of my class from Wharton while you were struggling to maintain a C average at State College. Because I have the financial expertise all of you lack. Because I see where the market is going while you're all looking backward. I gathered my papers, hands shaking but voice steady. This company won't survive another decade without adapting. But apparently, neither will this conversation. I walked out, letting the heavy wooden door slam behind me. The night air hit my lungs like ice water. Stars glittered overhead, impossibly bright against the black mountain sky. I trudged through fresh snow to the small guest cabin about 100 yards from the main house. I needed space, distance, a moment to breathe before deciding my next move. Inside my cabin, I built a small fire and sat cross-legged on the wool rug, trying to calm my racing thoughts. My phone buzzed. A text from Vivian. Meeting continuing without you. We'll sync up tomorrow before departure. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. For years, I'd been trying to prove my worth to people who had already decided I had none. Every presentation I'd prepared, every trend analysis I'd conducted, every contract I'd secured, all dismissed as lucky breaks or trivial contributions. At midnight, I heard vehicles starting. I moved to the window and watched in disbelief as 3 SUVs pulled away from the main house, headlights cutting through the snowy darkness. My heart rate accelerated. Surely they weren't all leaving. Not. At midnight, in a snowstorm. Not without telling me. I grabbed my coat and boots, rushing outside. The final SUV was turning down the long driveway. I waved my arms, shouting into the night, but the vehicle didn't slow. In seconds, it disappeared around the bend, leaving nothing but swirling snow and silence. I stood frozen, not from the cold, but from shock. Had they really just left me? Here? 10 miles from the nearest town with no vehicle? I fumbled for my phone. No signal. Of course not. The cabins were in a notorious dead zone. Why we used satellite internet for work sessions. I walked quickly to the main house, my boots crunching through fresh powder. The door was locked. Tried my key. It didn't work. Through the window, I could see they'd left in a hurry. Coffee cups still on the table. Laptops gone. The fire dying in the grate. I pounded on the door, more from frustration than hope. The echo mocked me across the empty clearing. That's when I noticed it. A note taped to the window beside the door. Time for the youngest to grow up. Maybe spend the night considering your future with the company. Keys to the old Jeep are in the shed. It might start if you can figure out how. Read. I stared at the note, my breath creating small clouds in the freezing air. This wasn't an accident or oversight. This was intentional. They had planned this. Waited until I was in the guest cabin, changed the locks, left me alone on a mountain in October. I made my way to the shed, fingers numb as I fumbled with the padlock. Inside, covered in dust, sat grandfather's ancient Jeep, a vehicle that hadn't run in at least 5 years. The key hung on a nail overhead, a taunt more than a solution. Back in the guest cabin, I assessed my situation with forced calm. I had a small cabin with firewood, my laptop, but no internet since the satellite system was in the main house. My phone, but no signal, enough food for maybe 1 day. The clothes I was wearing, plus one change, my wallet and ID. And, unexpectedly, the one thing I'd brought to finally make them listen, my complete analysis and transition plan for Chen Innovations, including my private research on our competitors' vulnerabilities. As I stoked the fire higher, a strange clarity settled over me. For years, I'd been trying to earn a place at a table where my chair had already been removed. I'd been seeking approval from people who saw me as nothing but an obligation, a diversity hire, the environmentalist little sister they humored. I sat back on my heels, watching the flames grow stronger. "You want me to consider my future with the company?" I whispered to the empty room. "I think I will." I opened my laptop and began to work. I didn't need internet for what I was planning. I just needed the files I'd been quietly compiling for years: financial projections, market analyses, investor profiles, and one folder I'd never intended to open, the evidence of Reed's creative accounting that I'd discovered 6 months ago and had been unsure how to address. Outside, the snow continued to fall. Inside, a plan began to form, not of escape, but of transformation. They thought abandoning me here would teach me to stay in my place. They didn't realize they had just freed me to create a new one. Dawn broke clear and frigid. I had slept maybe 2 hours, but adrenaline kept me focused. I gathered my things, pulled on my coat, and made my way to the shed. I wasn't much of a mechanic, but I understood systems, how things connected, how energy flowed. I'd watched our grandfather maintain this Jeep countless times during childhood summers. Battery was dead, of course, but the shed contained a small solar charging system for the electric tools. Grandfather had always been forward-thinking. The sustainability streak in our family hadn't started with me. After an hour of creative wiring and patient waiting, I had enough charge to attempt a start. The engine protested, coughed, died. I tried again. Nothing. On the 3rd attempt, I closed my eyes and whispered, "Please, grandfather, one more innovation." I turned the key, and the engine roared to life, spewing a cloud of exhaust into the crisp morning air. The old Jeep handled the snow-covered mountain road better than I'd expected. Its heavy frame plowed through drifts while I navigated hairpin turns with white knuckles and absolute focus. 3 hours later, I rolled into the small town of Pine Ridge, physically exhausted but mentally sharper than I'd ever been. The town diner had what I needed most: Wi-Fi and coffee. I claimed a corner booth, ordered the largest black coffee on the menu, and opened my laptop. First step: access. I had prepared for this moment without realizing it, having set up authentication backups that didn't require phone verification. Within minutes, I was in my bank accounts, email, and most importantly, my investment portfolio. Next, leverage. I had been quietly building my own investments since college, living frugally while my siblings purchased vacation homes and sports cars. What they saw as my financial insignificance was actually careful strategy. My portfolio was substantial, diversified, and liquid. I took a deep breath and executed the first part of my plan, selling everything, every stock, every bond, every carefully selected sustainable energy investment. By the time my coffee had cooled, I had liquidated assets worth $42 million. Then I made the call that would change everything. Not to my family. They could wait. I called Akira Tanaka, CEO of Green Summit Capital and Chen Innovation's most significant potential investor. The investor Reed had dismissed as a trend-chasing activist. "Ms. Tanaka," I said when she answered, "this is Eliza Chen, Environmental Finance Director at Chen Innovations. I believe we have a mutual opportunity to discuss." 2 hours and another coffee later, I had an agreement in principle. Green Summit Capital had been seeking entry into our market sector. They had the capital but needed the established manufacturing, framework, and client connections that Chen Innovations possessed. What they didn't need was the current leadership that refused to evolve. The final piece came together when I contacted our family attorney, Mr. Patterson. Though loyal to the Chen family for decades, he had always treated me with respect that my siblings didn't. More importantly, he had been present when our father had structured the company ownership in a way my siblings never fully understood. "Eliza," he said after I explained my situation, "I've been waiting for this call for years. Your father anticipated this scenario, you know. Not the details, but the general dynamic." "What do you mean?" I asked, signaling the waitress for another coffee. "Why do you think your brothers and sister never managed to force you out completely? Despite their control of day-to-day operations, the ownership structure your father created requires family unanimity for any sale of company, assets, or equity." I sat up straighter. "They need my signature." "For any significant change, yes. And there's something else they either don't know or choose to ignore. Your father left each of you equal options to purchase additional shares from the family trust upon his retirement. Your siblings exercised partial options, focusing on controlling voting blocks for operations, but the majority of potential equity remains unclaimed." My heart raced. "And I can still exercise my full option?" "Until the 5-year mark after his retirement, which is next week," I finished, the pieces falling into place. By early afternoon, I had negotiated a bridge loan from Green Summit Capital, secured against my exercised options and personal assets. By evening, I had submitted the paperwork to exercise my full share options and had structured a deal for Green Summit to purchase a significant minority stake, one that would dilute my siblings' control while preserving mine. I checked into the small town's only hotel as darkness fell, my body exhausted, but my mind still racing. Outside my window, snow began to fall again, gentle and quiet. I watched the flakes swirl in the yellow glow of the street lamp and wondered if my siblings had returned to the mountain cabin yet. Had they discovered I was gone? Were they concerned or merely irritated that their lesson hadn't played out as planned? My phone, now with full signal, remained silent. No calls, no texts asking if I was safe. Their silence confirmed everything. I slept deeply that night, waking only when my phone chimed with an email from Mr. Patterson at 5:43 a.m. Transaction complete. Board meeting called for 9 a.m. as requested. Good luck, Eliza. Your father would be proud. I dressed carefully in the one professional outfit I had with me, black pants and a forest green sweater that Vivian had once called too earthy for business meetings. I pulled my hair back into a smooth ponytail, applied minimal makeup, and evaluated my reflection. I looked exactly like myself. No power suit, no artificial enhancements. Just the woman they had always underestimated, now holding all the cards. The 5-hour drive to the company headquarters passed in a blur of strategy refinement and one-handed phone calls. By the time I pulled into the reserved parking space that had never before had my name on it, but mysteriously did now, thanks to Mr. Patterson's efficiency, I had confirmed attendance from every board member and executive, including my siblings. I walked through the glass doors of Chen Innovations headquarters at precisely 8:45 a.m. The receptionist did a double take. "Ms. Chen, We weren't expecting you today. The board meeting is exactly why I'm here, Angela. Thank you. I continued, toward the elevator, aware of her confused expression as she reached for her phone. The executive floor was buzzing with unusual energy. Administrative assistants whispered as I passed. Junior executives who normally ignored me nodded with newfound respect. News travels fast in corporate corridors, especially news involving ownership changes and unexpected capital infusions. I paused outside the boardroom, taking a moment to center myself. Through the glass wall, I could see them all assembled, the board members looking curious, my siblings looking thunderous. Reed stood at the head of the table, gesturing emphatically. Marcus sat with arms crossed, while Vivian typed furiously on her phone. I checked the time, 8:58 a.m. Then I pushed open the door and stepped into my new future. The conversation stopped abruptly. All heads turned toward me. Reed recovered first, his CEO smile sliding into place like a mask. Eliza, we were just discussing your adventure. Glad to see you made it back to civilization, though you might have mentioned you got the Jeep working before we sent a search party. Were you planning to send a search party, Reed? Before or after your 10 a.m. investor call? I set my laptop on the table and remained standing. Don't worry, I rescheduled it, among other things. Confusion flickered across his face. You what? Mr. Patterson chose that moment to enter, followed by Akira Tanaka and two Green Summit executives in impeccable suits. Now genuine alarm registered on my siblings' faces. What is this? Marcus demanded, half rising from his chair. Reed. Who authorized this meeting change? I did, I said simply, taking the seat at the head of the table, Reed's seat. As the new majority shareholder of Chen Innovations. The room erupted into chaos. Reed's face flushed crimson. Vivian's mouth opened and closed without sound. Marcus swore loudly enough for heads to turn. That's impossible, Reed finally managed. Your shares are minimal. Consultative only. Mr. Patterson cleared his throat. Actually, as of 5:17 this morning, Ms. Eliza Chen has exercised her full options under the family trust agreement, acquiring an additional 28% equity. Combined with her existing shares and the newly issued shares purchased by Green Summit Capital, she now controls 53% of Chen Innovations. The silence that followed was absolute. I could hear the wall clock ticking, counting down the moments of the old regime. This is a joke, Marcus said finally. It has to be. No joke, I replied evenly. Just good business, the kind you three have been too short-sighted to recognize. Reed leaned forward, his knuckles white against the polished table. You can't just walk in and take over. You don't have the experience, the connections. I have exactly what this company needs, I cut him off. A vision for the future instead of an attachment to the past. And as for connections, I nodded toward Akira Tanaka. I've secured the partnership you dismissed as unnecessary. Green Summit has committed $100 million in capital investment, Ms. Tanaka added smoothly, contingent upon the leadership and strategic changes Ms. Chen has outlined. Vivian found her voice at last. This is about last night, isn't it? You're throwing a tantrum because we left you to think about your attitude. I met her gaze steadily. You left me stranded on a mountain in freezing temperatures with no transportation and no communication. You called it a lesson. I'm calling it the wake-up call I needed. I opened my laptop and turned it to face the board. This is the sustainability transition plan I've been developing for 3 years, the one you've repeatedly ignored. It projects 37% growth within 18 months, positioning Chen Innovations as a leader in the green manufacturing revolution. The board has already expressed preliminary approval, Mr. Patterson added, contingent upon one final item on today's agenda. I nodded and pulled out 3 manila folders, sliding them across the table to my siblings. Your termination agreements. Generous severance, full benefits for 6 months, and non-compete clauses that still allow you plenty of career options outside of sustainable technology. Reed didn't open his folder. His face had gone from red to pale, eyes narrow with a fury I'd never witnessed. You would destroy our family over one night? Over a stupid prank? No, Reed. You destroyed our family every time you undermined me. Every time you called me a diversity hire. Every time you took credit for my work while excluding me from decisions. I kept my voice level, professional. I'm saving the company despite our family, not because of it. Marcus slammed his fist on the table. This is insane. We built this company. Our father built this company, I corrected. You've been riding his legacy while driving his vision into the ground. That ends today. Vivian, always the strategist, was already skimming her termination agreement. The severance is substantial, she conceded, calculating her options. More than fair, I agreed. Sign now, and you'll have the funds before lunch. Fight me, and I'll reduce the offer hourly while our legal team reviews certain accounting irregularities I've documented over the past 2 years. Reed's head snapped. Up. What irregularities? I smiled thinly. The ones you thought no one noticed because you assigned me to special projects instead of core financial oversight. Turns out, being underestimated has its advantages. I see everything while remaining unseen. The board shifted uncomfortably. This was more family drama than they'd signed up for, but the financial implications kept them riveted. You have until 9:30 to decide, I continued, checking my watch. After that, we move forward with or without your cooperation. The next 20 minutes were tense but predictable. Marcus raged, Vivian calculated, and Reed attempted last-minute power plays, calling allies who had already aligned with the new vision, threatening consequences he no longer had power to deliver. At 9:28, Vivian signed first. Always practical, she recognized defeat when she saw it. Marcus followed at 9:29, slamming the pen down hard enough to break it. Reed waited until 9:34, 7 seconds before my deadline to begin legal proceedings. As they walked out, Reed stiff-backed and silent, Marcus muttering threats, Vivian already on her phone networking, I felt no triumph, no petty satisfaction. Only a strange lightness, as if I'd set down a burden I'd carried so long I'd forgotten it wasn't part of me. The board meeting continued smoothly after that. We reviewed the transition plan, appointed interim executives, and scheduled follow-up sessions to implement our new direction. By noon, Chen Innovations had officially entered a new era, one built on sustainability, innovation, and actual vision. As the room cleared, Akira Tanaka lingered. That couldn't have been easy, she said quietly. I looked around the empty boardroom, the place I'd been trying to earn respect for nearly a decade. Actually, it was. The hard part was believing I deserved to be here all along. Later that afternoon, I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of what was now my office, watching the city below. My phone buzzed with a text from Reed. You'll regret this. Family should come first. I didn't respond immediately. I thought about last night on the mountain, the cold seeping through my boots as I watched their headlights disappear. I thought about all the meetings where my voice had been silenced, all the ideas that had been dismissed, all the times I'd been told to know my place. Finally, I typed a reply. I agree. Family should come first. That's why I couldn't let you destroy our father's legacy. The company will be here if you ever want to apply for a position. On merit alone. I set my phone down and turned back to the windows. The afternoon sun broke through clouds, illuminating the city in golden light. Below, people moved with purpose, each on their own path. For the first time in my professional life, I was finally on mine. They had left me stranded in the cold, thinking I would break. Instead, I had emerged stronger, clearer, and finally free of the need for their approval. By abandoning me, they had inadvertently set me free. And freedom, once experienced, is impossible to surrender. I watched the sunset from my new office, casting long shadows across the polished concrete floors. The space felt both foreign and strangely familiar, like a room I'd visited in dreams but never expected to occupy in waking life. My father's collection of geological specimens still lined the built-in shelves, each rock and crystal containing millions of years of pressure and transformation. How fitting that they now belonged in my space. My phone had been uncharacteristically quiet since the board meeting. The corporate ecosystem was adjusting to its seismic shift, employees recalibrating their understanding of the power structure. I knew the whispers would be traveling through every department. The youngest Chen, they'd say. The quiet one. Who would have thought? I smiled at the irony. They believed this transformation had happened overnight, a sudden coup born from a single act of familial betrayal. They didn't see the years of preparation, the careful study, the patient accumulation of knowledge and resources. They didn't know that while my siblings were claiming spotlight moments, I had been building a foundation. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Angela, the executive assistant who had served Reed for 7 years, stood hesitantly at the door. "Ms. Chen, sorry to disturb you, but there are several urgent matters requiring attention." She held a tablet, with at least 20 notification flags visible from where I stood. "Please call me Eliza," I said, gesturing her in, "and you don't need to apologize for doing your job efficiently." She blinked, clearly unaccustomed to such acknowledgement. "There are 3 division heads waiting for direction on the manufacturing transition. The PR team needs approval on the leadership change announcement. HR has questions about the new organizational structure and—" She paused. "Your mother has called 4 times. My chest tightened at the last item. My mother, Eliza Chen, had stepped away from company involvement after my father's death, preferring the role of family matriarch to business leader. She had always been Reed's strongest advocate, viewing him as the natural heir to my father's vision. "Let's handle the business matters first," I said, moving toward the conference area of the office. "Please ask the division heads to join us. We'll address each concern methodically." The next 3 hours passed in a blur of focused productivity. I articulated the transition strategy with clarity that surprised even me, outlining Phase 1 of our sustainability pivot, establishing clear metrics for success, and addressing concerns with both empathy and firmness. The division heads left, looking cautiously optimistic, their initial skepticism giving way to tentative engagement with the new vision. "You've clearly been planning this for some time," observed Diane Murphy, our head of manufacturing, as the meeting concluded. "Not this exactly," I admitted. "But the direction, yes. I've been developing this transition framework for years, refining it with each market shift and technological advancement." "Why didn't you push harder before?" she asked, gathering her notes. I considered my answer carefully. I was still learning the difference between having a voice and using it effectively. After the division heads departed, I approved the press release with minimal edits, scheduled a company-wide town hall for the following morning, and provided HR with the organizational chart I'd developed during those quiet hours in the mountain cabin. Each decision flowed from the next with a clarity I'd never experienced in my previous role. By the time I finished, darkness had fallen completely. Angela had long since gone home, leaving a note with my mother's contact information highlighted prominently. I couldn't postpone this conversation any longer. I dialed her number, bracing myself. She answered on the first ring. "Finally," she said, her voice tight with controlled emotion. "I was beginning to think you'd disappeared permanently." "Hello, Mother," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "Is that what you call dismantling our family legacy? Firing your own siblings? Bringing in outside investors without family consultation?" I moved to the window, looking out at the city lights blinking on like stars. "The legacy isn't being dismantled. It's being preserved and evolved, exactly as Father would have wanted. Your father would never have approved of this hostile takeover, she snapped. He built this company for all of you to lead together. Together, I repeated. Not with 3 in charge and 1 dismissed as irrelevant. Not with Reed calling me a diversity hire to clients. Not with Marcus taking credit for my environmental impact studies. Not with Vivian undermining my financial projections. A pause. They were trying to protect you from yourself, Eliza. From your idealism. By abandoning me on a mountain in freezing temperatures? With no vehicle, no phone signal, no way to call for help if something had gone wrong? My voice remained steady despite the anger flickering beneath my words. Another pause, longer this time. They what? For the first time, I detected genuine surprise in her tone. I explained what had happened after the strategy disagreement, detailing how they had left me at the cabin, changed the locks, and departed in the middle of the night. They said you stayed behind voluntarily, my mother said slowly. That you wanted time alone to reconsider your position with the company. I laughed, a short, sharp sound devoid of humor. And you believed that? That I chose to remain alone on a mountain with no transportation or communication? That doesn't sound like me, Mother, and you know it. Her breathing changed, becoming more measured, deliberate. Eliza Chen was recalculating, as she always did when confronted with information that disrupted her carefully constructed narrative. Even so, she said finally, your response seems disproportionate. Does it? I moved to my father's old desk, running my fingers over the smooth wood. Or does it seem exactly proportionate to years of being undervalued, undermined, and now literally abandoned? You've always been so sensitive, Eliza. No, Mother. I've always been so accommodating. There's a difference. I sat in the leather chair, feeling its solid support. But that ended when I realized my accommodation was enabling their sabotage, not just of me, but of the company's future. They're your family, she insisted, voice cracking slightly. Yes, and I'm theirs. That didn't stop them from leaving me in a potentially life-threatening situation because I challenged their business strategy. The silence stretched between us, heavy with decades of unspoken truths. What do you want me to do? She finally asked, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. The question surprised me. Eliza Chen rarely asked for direction from anyone, least of all her youngest child. I want you to understand that this isn't revenge, I said carefully. It's correction. The company is facing extinction if it doesn't evolve. Reed, Marcus, and Vivian were driving it toward obsolescence out of stubborn adherence to outdated methods. I'm saving it. And them? Your siblings? Are you saving them too? I considered this. I've given them financial security through the severance packages. The rest is up to them. Some lessons can only be learned through consequence. Another long pause. Then, unexpectedly, your father always said you were the one who truly understood the heartbeat of innovation. Not just the profit, but the purpose. My breath caught. He said that? Not to you, apparently, and certainly not to Reed. Hint of her characteristic dryness returned. He told me, the week before his heart attack, said he worried about leaving the company in hands that knew the price of everything but the value of nothing. Tears stung my eyes unexpectedly. Why didn't you ever tell me? Because I didn't believe him, she replied with brutal honesty. I thought he was being sentimental, seeing himself in you because you shared his environmental concerns. I thought Reed's practicality was what the company needed. I absorbed this, feeling old wounds both reopen and begin to heal simultaneously. And now? Now I'm not sure what to think, she admitted. But I do know your father built that mountain. Cabin with a backup generator, a satellite phone in a locked cabinet, and an emergency ATV in the storage unit behind the woodshed. Your siblings knew that. The fact that they left you there without ensuring you had access to any of those things troubles me deeply. It was the closest my mother would come to an apology or acknowledgement. I recognized it for the significant concession it was. "I'm holding a company-wide town hall tomorrow morning," I said. "I'd appreciate your presence, if you're willing." After a moment's hesitation, "Text me the details." When we ended the call, I sat in the growing darkness of my office, processing the conversation. For the first time in my adult life, I had spoken to my mother as an equal, neither deferential nor defiant. The ground had shifted beneath our relationship, just as it had beneath the company. I finally left the office near midnight, driving to my modest apartment in the Arts District, a choice my siblings had always mocked as beneath our family's status. The familiar space welcomed me with its simple comforts: books lining the walls, plants thriving on every windowsill, the hand-woven throw from a women's cooperative in Peru draped across my reading chair. I shed my professional clothes and pulled on soft leggings and an oversized sweater. The events of the past 36 hours swirled in my mind. The betrayal, the cold mountain night, the clarity that had come with being abandoned, the swift and decisive actions that had forever altered my family's power dynamic. Sleep seemed impossible, so I made tea and settled into my reading chair with my laptop. There were hundreds of emails demanding attention, each flagged with varying levels of urgency. I began sorting through them methodically, grouping them by priority and relationship to our transition plan. An hour in, a name caught my eye: Eliza Chen. Subject line: "We need to talk." I opened it, bracing for hostility or manipulation. "Eliza, I won't pretend to understand what happened today, but I know enough about business to recognize a meticulously executed plan when I see one. You've clearly been preparing for this longer than any of us realized. I underestimated you." We all did. Maybe that conversation is worth having, not as former colleagues, but as sisters. My apartment, tomorrow, 8 p.m. V. I stared at the screen, searching for the hidden agenda in her words. Vivian had always been the most strategic of my siblings, the one who could smile while sliding a knife between your ribs. Was this genuine reflection, or the beginning of a counteroffensive? Before I could decide, another email arrived, this one from Marcus. No subject line. "You think you've won. You haven't. This isn't over." 7 words, dripping with characteristic hostility. I wasn't surprised. Marcus had always addressed challenges with brute force, rather than adaptation. I flagged his email for our security team to monitor. I expected a message from Reed to complete the set, but none came. His silence concerned me more than Marcus's threats. Reed was dangerous when quiet, his mind calculating angles others couldn't see. Dawn found me still awake, having worked through most of the urgent emails and drafted my address for the town hall. I showered, dressed in a simple charcoal dress with a structured jacket in the company's signature green, and headed back to headquarters before most of the city had awakened. The executive floor was quiet when I arrived, but I noticed small changes already taking place. The pretentious orchids Reed had insisted on were gone from the reception area. The wall of photographs showcasing Reed with various dignitaries had been replaced with our company timeline, including the sustainability innovations my father had pioneered in the early days. Angela arrived at 7 a.m. sharp, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed me one without asking. "You take it black with 1 raw sugar," she said matter-of-factly. "I've been getting your coffee for 3 years whenever Reed asked you to join his meetings. You just never noticed because he always claimed the cup I brought for you." I blinked, absorbing this small revelation. How many other contributions of mine had been quietly appropriated over the years? "Thank you, Angela," I said, truly seeing her for perhaps the first time. "For the coffee and for the insight." She nodded briskly. "The town hall is set for 9 a.m. in the main auditorium. We've arranged video conferencing for the manufacturing facilities. Security has been briefed to expect high emotions, but has been instructed to intervene only if physically necessary. You anticipated potential. Disruption? A small, competent smile. Mr. Marcus sent some rather explicit emails to several department heads last night. I took the liberty of forwarding them to legal and security. I made a mental note to immediately review Angela's compensation package. Her awareness and discretion were clearly undervalued assets. The town hall itself proved less dramatic than anticipated. I stood before nearly 400 employees, some in person, some on screens representing our various facilities, and spoke from a place of authentic vision rather than rehearsed corporate platitudes. Chen Innovations stands at a crossroads, I began, eschewing the teleprompter Reed would have used. The world is changing around us. Resources are growing scarcer. Climate impacts are affecting our supply chains. Consumers are demanding sustainable alternatives. Investors are shifting capital toward responsible enterprises. I moved away from the podium, standing closer to the gathered employees. We can cling to the methods of the past and slowly become obsolete, or we can embrace transformation, leveraging our manufacturing expertise to become leaders in the green technology revolution. I outlined the transition plan in clear, accessible terms, the phased approach to retrofitting our facilities, the retraining programs for our workforce, the new product lines we would develop, and most importantly, the values that would guide every decision. This will not be easy, I acknowledged. Transformation never is. But the alternative, slow decline into irrelevance, is far more painful and offers no future for the people in this room. Questions followed. Honest, concerned inquiries about job security, timelines, investment priorities. I answered each directly, without corporate doublespeak or false promises. I don't have all the answers, I said, when faced with a particularly complex question about international regulatory compliance. But I'm committed to finding them, and I'll need your expertise to do it right. The ripple of surprise that moved through the room told me everything about Reed's leadership style. Admitting uncertainty had likely never happened in this auditorium before. As the town hall concluded, I noticed my mother standing at the back, her expression unreadable. She didn't approach afterward, but her presence spoke volumes. Eleanor Chen was reserving judgment, waiting to see if her youngest child could truly deliver on such ambitious promises. I spent the remainder of the day in back-to-back meetings with department heads, financial advisors, and the integration team from Green Summit Capital. By late afternoon, the initial shock of the leadership change had evolved into tentative momentum. Small working groups had formed organically to address transition challenges. The company intranet was alive with questions, suggestions, and cautious optimism. At 7:30 p.m., I left the office, declining the security escort Angela had arranged. The drive to Vivian's downtown penthouse gave me time to center myself for whatever awaited. Of my 3 siblings, Vivian had always been the most enigmatic, capable of both surprising kindness and calculated cruelty, depending on what served her interests. Her building's doorman recognized me immediately, which was itself revealing. Despite our strained relationship, Vivian had apparently listed me as a welcomed visitor. The private elevator whisked me to the top floor, opening directly into her minimalist sanctuary of white furniture and strategic splashes of color. Vivian stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, silhouetted against the city lights, a glass of wine in hand. Unlike her usual impeccably tailored business attire, she wore simple black pants and a cashmere sweater, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. She looked younger, more vulnerable. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said without turning. "Neither was I admitted, remaining near the elevator. She turned then, studying me with the intense focus that had intimidated countless business rivals. "You look different." "I'm wearing the same style I always have." "It's not the clothes." She gestured vaguely. "It's how you wear them, like They finally fit. I moved further into the room but declined to sit when she indicated the white sofa. This conversation required the equal footing of standing. Why did you want to see me, Vivian? To negotiate? Threaten? Reconcile? She considered her wine, swirling it gently. I'm not entirely sure. Perhaps to understand. What part? The business strategy or the family betrayal? Both. Neither. She set her glass down on a side table with deliberate precision. Did you always plan this? Were you just waiting for the right moment all these years? I thought carefully before answering. I always knew the company needed to evolve toward sustainability. I always hoped to be part of leading that evolution. But the specific actions of yesterday? No. Those were catalyzed by being abandoned on a mountain by my own family. Reed said you needed a wake-up call, that you were undermining company stability with your environmental fixation. She didn't sound convinced of this narrative, merely reporting it. And you believed him enough to leave me there, without communication, without transportation. I kept my voice level. Did any of you consider what would happen if the weather had worsened? If I'd been injured trying to find help? Vivian had the grace to look uncomfortable. Reed assured us the old Jeep was functional, that you'd figure it out or call when you were ready to be reasonable. With what phone, Vivian? The one with no signal? Or perhaps the satellite phone locked in the main cabin that you knew I couldn't access? She flinched slightly. I didn't know about the signal issues. I've always used the satellite system when we're there. The satellite system in the main house. The one you locked me out of. I took a step closer. But let's be honest. Even if you'd known, would it have changed your actions? Or would Reed's assessment of what I needed have outweighed basic safety considerations? Her silence was answer enough. Here's what I don't understand, I continued. You're brilliant, Vivian. Your marketing strategies doubled our market penetration in European markets. You can read people, trends, cultural shifts better than anyone I know. How did you not see that sustainability isn't just my fixation? It's the future of industrial manufacturing. She moved to the kitchen island, pouring another glass of wine with practiced ease. You assume I didn't see it? I stared at her. You knew? Of course I knew. A hint of the old sharpness returned to her voice. My entire job is anticipating where markets are heading. You think I missed the fact that every major competitor is investing in green technology? That investment firms are divesting from carbon-heavy industries? That Generation Z consumers won't purchase from companies without environmental commitments? Then why? Because Reed wouldn't hear it, she cut me off. Because Marcus's entire operational model depends on the old ways. Because... She hesitated. Because I didn't have the courage to risk my position by aligning with you. The admission hung between us, unexpected and raw. You could have been my ally, I said quietly. We could have approached this as a united front. And now? Now the transition happens with or without your input. The question is whether you want to be part of building the future or stuck defending the past. Vivian took a long sip of her wine, considering. What exactly are you offering? Not a return to your previous position, I clarified immediately. That's not possible after what happened. But I do need someone who understands how to communicate our transformation to different stakeholders. A consulting role, perhaps, with clear deliverables and boundaries. Under your authority. It wasn't a question. Yes, absolutely under my authority. She set her glass down again, this time less precisely. You've changed, Eliza. I'm not sure I would have had the clarity to offer such terms to someone who left me stranded in the wilderness. It's not about forgiveness, I said honestly. It's about utilizing valuable skills within appropriate boundaries. You've always excelled at reinventing narratives. The company can benefit from that talent, even while I maintain the personal Distance necessary after such a profound breach of trust. Vivian looked at me with something like respect. "I'll consider it," she said finally. "On one condition." "Which is?" "Tell me how it felt when you realized you'd outmaneuvered all of us, when you took control of everything we thought was ours." I met her gaze directly. It felt like breathing properly for the first time in years, like setting down a weight I never should have carried. Not triumphant, Vivian. Necessary. She nodded slowly. "I'll have my response to your offer by tomorrow evening." As I left her penthouse, the night air felt cleaner somehow, as if the truth itself had purifying properties. The conversation had been neither reconciliation nor further rupture, but something more complex, a recalibration of a relationship that had been fundamentally imbalanced for decades. In my car, I checked my phone to find a single text message. Waiting. From my mother. "Your father would have been proud today, not of what you did, but of how you did it. With clarity, purpose, and without cruelty despite ample provocation. We should talk more. Soon." I drove home through the quiet streets, feeling the disparate pieces of my new reality settling into place. The path ahead would not be easy. Reed's silence still concerned me. Marcus's threats would require vigilance. The company's transformation would face resistance both internal and external. But for the first time, I was navigating these challenges as myself, not as the accommodating youngest sibling, not as the overlooked environmental specialist, but as a leader with both vision and the authority to implement it. They had left me alone in the cold, thinking isolation would break me. Instead, it had distilled me to my essential self, the person I was always meant to become once I stopped seeking their approval and started trusting my own judgment. I arrived home to find a small package leaning against my apartment door. Inside was a smooth stone paperweight with a single word etched into its surface: unshakable, and a note in my father's handwriting that I'd never seen before. For Eliza, when she's ready to lead. The quiet ones see furthest. I held the stone in my palm, feeling its solid weight and the truth it contained. The quiet ones do see furthest, especially when everyone else underestimates their vision. Morning arrived with unexpected clarity, not the foggy transition from sleep to wakefulness I'd grown accustomed to after years of late nights analyzing environmental impact reports, but a crisp alertness that felt like another aspect of my transformation. The stone paperweight sat on my nightstand where I'd placed it the night before, catching early sunlight and throwing prism patterns across my ceiling. Unshakable. My father's posthumous vote of confidence still felt surreal. I moved through my morning routine with deliberate calm, choosing a deep emerald suit that I'd purchased years ago but rarely worn. Reed had once commented that it looked too authoritative for my position. The irony wasn't lost on me as I fastened the buttons and assessed my reflection. Authority now radiated from within, the clothing merely its external expression. My phone buzzed with a text from Akira Tanaka. WSJ reporter called seeking comment on the Chen family power struggle. Anticipate media attention today. Green Summit standing firmly behind your leadership. I texted back a brief thanks, unsurprised by this development. Corporate leadership changes always attracted attention. Dramatic ones involving family dynamics were irresistible to business media. I had prepared talking points during those long nighttime hours, anticipating this inevitability. The drive to headquarters felt different, the familiar route now leading to a transformed destination. I noticed details I'd previously overlooked: the community garden our employees had started beside the parking structure, the solar panels. Installed during my father's final year as CEO, and nearly removed during Reed's first budget review, the banner announcing our 30th anniversary that omitted any mention of sustainability, despite my efforts to include it. Small changes, I reminded myself, then systemic ones. Angela met me at the elevator, tablet in hand and concern evident in her normally composed features. "Marcus is in the building," she said without preamble. Security reports he arrived at 6:15 a.m. and went directly to his former office. He's refusing to acknowledge the termination and has called an emergency executive session with several department heads for 9:30. I nodded, absorbing this information without allowing it to disrupt my focus. Who responded to his call? 3 directors, all from divisions that would be most disrupted by our sustainability transition: operations, legacy manufacturing, and surprisingly, legal. The last one raised my eyebrows. Jeffrey Winters from legal? Yes, though security noted he looked extremely uncomfortable when arriving. Have security maintain distance but awareness. No confrontation unless absolutely necessary. And please ask Mr. Winters to see me immediately. Angela nodded briskly and stepped away to make the calls while I continued to my office. The morning sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the space in a way that seemed symbolic. Shadows receding, clarity ascending. Jeffrey Winters arrived within minutes, his usual polished appearance slightly disheveled, anxiety evident in his fidgeting hands. "Ms. Chen, Eliza, I can explain," he began before I'd even offered him a seat. I gestured toward the conversation area, choosing to sit across from him rather than behind the imposing desk. "I'm listening, Jeffrey." He sank into the chair, looking relieved at the opportunity to speak. "Marcus called me at home last night. Said there had been a terrible misunderstanding, that the board had been misled, that you had manipulated legal documents to seize control." He ran a hand through his thinning hair. He claimed to have evidence of impropriety that would invalidate yesterday's actions and said he needed legal counsel present to document the fraud. "And you believed him?" I kept my tone neutral, observational rather than accusatory. Jeffrey's expression shifted from anxiety to something more complex, embarrassment tinged with dawning comprehension. I didn't not believe him. Marcus has always been so certain, so authoritative. And the idea that you had suddenly taken control seemed so impossible, I supplied. "Unexpected," he corrected diplomatically. But when I arrived this morning and saw him, the way he was behaving, demanding loyalty, making thinly veiled threats about people's futures with the company. He straightened his shoulders. I realized I was being manipulated. That's when I asked Angela to arrange this meeting. I studied him, this man who had navigated our company's legal waters for 15 years, who had always treated me with professional courtesy, if not particular attention. "What do you think happened yesterday, Jeffrey?" He considered his response carefully. "Based on the properly executed documents I reviewed afterward, a legitimate transfer of controlling interest followed by a board-approved leadership change. And do you have any legal concerns about those proceedings?" "None," he said firmly. "Everything was executed in accordance with the company bylaws and the family trust provisions." I nodded, satisfied with his assessment and apparent realignment. "Then I'd appreciate your presence when I address Marcus. Your legal perspective may help clarify the reality of the situation." Together we walked to what had been Marcus's corner office, a space characterized by aggressive modernism, all sharp angles and metallic surfaces that always reminded me of weapons more than furniture. Through the glass walls, I could see my brother pacing like a caged predator, gesturing emphatically to the uncomfortable-looking directors seated before him. I entered without knocking, Jeffrey a half step behind me. The conversation halted abruptly. "Good morning," I said pleasantly. "I understand there's some confusion about yesterday's leadership transition." Marcus's face flushed with the quick anger he'd never learned to control. "The only confusion is yours if you think this coup will stand. I've already contacted the Shareholders Alliance. They're calling an emergency vote to reinstate proper leadership." "The Shareholders Alliance that controls less than 20% of voting shares?" I kept my voice even. That would be an ineffective strategy even if they all oppose the transition, which, based on the calls I received last night, they don't. I turned to address the three directors, who looked increasingly uncomfortable. I understand loyalty is valuable, and transitions can be unsettling. But I want to be absolutely clear. What happened yesterday was legally binding and strategically necessary for this company's future. Jeffrey stepped forward. As Chief Legal Counsel, I can confirm that all actions taken were in complete accordance with company bylaws and the Chen family trust provisions. The transfer of controlling interest and subsequent leadership changes are legally unassailable. Marcus slammed his hand on the desk. This is absurd. She's manipulated everyone with her environmental guilt trips and victim narrative. 3 days ago, she was nothing but a glorified researcher we kept around for family obligation. His words hung in the air, revealing more than he intended about how he truly viewed me. The directors exchanged uncomfortable glances. I addressed them directly. You're free to attend this unofficial meeting if you choose. You're also free to join the actual executive session scheduled for 10:30, where we'll be discussing implementation timelines for our sustainability transition. Your expertise would be valuable there. The choice is yours. One by one, they stood and murmured awkward excuses to Marcus before filing out. Only when the door closed behind them did I turn back to my brother. You have 2 options, I said, quietly. Leave voluntarily with the generous severance package you've already signed, or be escorted out by security for attempting to interfere with company operations after termination. Either way, you will not be in this building after the next 5 minutes. Marcus stared at me with naked hatred. You think you've won because you've got the paperwork and the board votes. But business isn't built on paperwork, Liz. It's built on relationships, on respect, on people knowing who really holds the power. You're right about one thing, I conceded. Business is built on relationships. That's why I spent yesterday personally calling our top 20 clients to explain our new direction. 16 expressed strong support for our sustainability pivot. 3 were cautiously optimistic. Only 1 expressed concern, and that was about timeline, not direction. I saw the first flicker of doubt cross his face. As for respect, I continued, you might be surprised how quickly it flows toward clear vision and inclusive leadership, rather than intimidation and past hierarchies. I glanced at my watch. 2 minutes, Marcus. Dignity or security? Your choice. For a moment, I thought he might actually lunge at me. His hands curled into fists, his breathing shallow and rapid. Then, with visible effort, he controlled himself. This isn't over, he said, grabbing his personal tablet and phone. When this green fantasy crashes into reality and the company starts bleeding money, don't expect me to help pick up the pieces. I would never expect that from you, I replied honestly. Safe travels, Marcus. He brushed past me roughly, muttering something I chose not to hear. Jeffrey and I watched through the glass wall as he stormed through the executive floor, employees instinctively moving out of his path like wildlife avoiding a predator. That went better than expected, Jeffrey observed dryly. Did it? I turned to him with a wry smile. He didn't throw anything or threaten specific legal action. For Marcus, that's practically diplomatic. I laughed despite myself, feeling some of the tension dissipate. Have security collect his personal items and arrange delivery to his home. And Jeffrey, thank you for doing the right thing, even when it was uncomfortable. He nodded, a new respect evident in his expression. The legal department is fully at your disposal, Eliza. Perhaps we could review the sustainability compliance frameworks later this week. I have some thoughts about structuring them to maximize both environmental impact and regulatory advantages. By mid-morning, the story of the Chen Innovations leadership change had hit the business press. Headlines ranged from factual, Chen Innovations pivots to sustainability under new leadership, to sensational, family feud erupts in boardroom coup at Chen. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from industry colleagues, former classmates, and journalists seeking exclusive insights. I instructed our communications team to release only the approved statement emphasizing the strategic shift toward sustainability rather than the family dynamics behind it. The company's future mattered more than the drama of how we'd arrived at this inflection point. The executive session at 10:30 proceeded with surprising productivity. Without Reed's tendency to dominate conversation, or Marcus's disruptive challenges, ideas flowed more freely. Department heads who had rarely spoken in previous meetings offered valuable insights about implementation challenges and opportunities. The transition timeline seems aggressive, noted Diane from manufacturing, but I actually think we could accelerate certain aspects by leveraging the modular design approach Eliza proposed last year, the one that was shelved for being too experimental. Others nodded, building on her suggestion with their own. I watched with quiet satisfaction as collaboration replaced competition, innovation supplanted protection of the status quo. By lunchtime, we had developed a revised implementation framework that improved upon my original plan in several key aspects. This was what I had always envisioned, not just my ideas enacted, but enhanced through diverse perspectives united by common purpose. "This is different," commented Rajiv from R&D as we concluded. "Usually, I leave these meetings with a headache and a longer to-do list of projects I don't believe in." Others laughed in recognition. "I actually want to get started," admitted Terry from supply chain. "I've got suppliers who've been pitching sustainable alternatives for years that we've been ignoring." The energy was palpable, the shift in corporate culture already beginning, despite being just 24 hours into the new reality. I ended the meeting by thanking everyone for their contributions and emphasizing that this collaborative approach would define our path forward. As the room cleared, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Cafe across the street, now. Important information about Reed. Come alone." I stared at the message, suspicion immediately flaring. After Marcus's display this morning, caution seemed warranted. Yet information about Reed's plans could be valuable. His continued silence concerned me more than Marcus's bluster or Vivian's calculated positioning. I forwarded the message to Angela with a note. "Having coffee across the street. Security should maintain visibility, but distance." The cafe was busy with the lunch crowd when I arrived, professionals from surrounding office buildings seeking better coffee than their workplace provided. I scanned the room, unsure who I was looking for until I noticed a familiar figure in the corner booth. Riley Zhang, Reed's executive assistant for the past 5 years. She looked up as I approached, her expression a complex mixture of anxiety and determination. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "I wasn't sure you would." I slid into the seat across from her. "Your message was intriguing and concerning." Riley glanced around nervously before leaning forward. "Reed's been making calls since yesterday afternoon, dozens of them, to investors, competitors, even regulatory contacts." "That's not unexpected," I observed. "He's likely exploring options." "It's more than that." She pulled out her tablet and slid it across the table. "He asked me to compile this list of potential vulnerabilities in the company's environmental compliance history. Points where we've technically met regulatory requirements but with questionable methods. He's planning to report these to the EPA if you don't reverse the leadership change." I studied the document, recognizing most of the incidents, shortcuts, taken under Reed and Marcus's direction that I had documented in my own files. He's essentially threatening to sabotage the company unless he's reinstated. "Yes." Riley looked miserable. "He doesn't know I'm here. He thinks I'm fully loyal to him rather than the company. But my father lost his fishing business to corporate pollution in the Gulf. Environmental integrity matters to me even if Reed never realized it." I considered her carefully. "Why show me this? You're risking your position with Reed." "Because I believe in what you're trying to do," she said simply. "The sustainability transition, the cultural change. I've watched you fight for these principles for years while being ignored or dismissed. When I saw how you handled the town hall yesterday, with honesty and vision instead of ego and manipulation, I knew I had to choose sides. Her sincerity was evident, but caution remained necessary. I appreciate this information, Riley. Truly. But I need to verify independently before taking action. Of course. She nodded. Check his secure cloud drive. Password is Dominance 2021. He thinks it's clever wordplay on his position. The strategy document is titled Leverage Options. And there's a recorded call with Gerald Harmon at Westridge where they discuss using the compliance issues as pressure points. Specific, verifiable details, either extremely well-crafted deception or genuine insider information. Why would Reed trust you with access to such sensitive material? Riley's expression hardened slightly. Because, like your siblings, he never really saw me. Just my function, not my values or capabilities. People who feel superior rarely consider that those they view as beneath them might have principles worth respecting. The insight struck me with its simple truth. How many allies had I overlooked in my years of focusing solely on my family's recognition? How many Riley Zhangs existed throughout the company, competent and values-driven but rendered invisible by hierarchical presumptions? What do you want in exchange for this information? I asked directly. She straightened her shoulders. A role in the sustainability transition team. I have a master's in environmental policy that Reed never bothered to notice on my resume. I've been tracking regulatory developments for years as part of my administrative duties. I can contribute more than coffee orders and calendar management. I found myself smiling at her forthright request. Send me your resume and 3 specific contributions you believe you could make to the transition. If they align with our needs, you'll have your opportunity. Relief and determination mingled in her expression. Thank you. That's all I wanted. A fair chance based on merit rather than position. As I returned to headquarters, I contemplated this unexpected alliance and the reminder it carried. Transformation required seeing people clearly, recognizing value where others had missed it, building connections based on shared purpose rather than traditional power structures. I spent the afternoon in a careful dance of verification and preparation. Working with Jeffrey and our cybersecurity team, we confirmed Riley's information. Reed had indeed been constructing a leverage strategy using the company's past environmental shortcuts against its new direction. The irony is breathtaking. Jeffrey noted as we reviewed the evidence. He's threatening to expose compliance issues he himself authorized as ammunition against our pivot to better compliance. Desperate people rarely appreciate irony, I observed. Prepare a preemptive disclosure document addressing each item on his list. We'll submit it to the EPA ourselves with a clear remediation plan tied to our sustainability transition. Jeffrey looked startled. That's unusually transparent. Most companies would fight to keep these borderline violations private. Most companies aren't publicly committing to environmental leadership while simultaneously vulnerable to exposure of past shortcuts. We need to control the narrative, acknowledge where we've fallen short while emphasizing our commitment to doing better. By late afternoon, we had drafted both the disclosure document and a public statement explaining our proactive approach to addressing past compliance issues. The legal team had prepared injunctions against Reed should he attempt to misrepresent the company's current direction or leadership. I was reviewing the final drafts when my phone rang, Vivian's name appearing on the screen. I assume you've heard about Reed's plans, she said without preamble when I answered. To leverage past environmental shortcuts against the company unless he's reinstated? Yes, we're aware. A pause. You don't sound particularly concerned. We're addressing it proactively. Preparing full disclosure and remediation plans before he can weaponize the information. Another pause, longer this time. That's not how Reed would handle it. I'm not Reed, I stated simply, clearly. something like respect-colored. Her tone. "I've made my decision about your consulting offer. I'd like to accept with one modification. Which is? I want to lead the communication strategy for this specific disclosure. I know exactly how to frame it to minimize reputational damage while maximizing the narrative value of transparent accountability." I considered her request. Vivian's talent for messaging and narrative construction was undeniable, and this particular challenge suited her skills perfectly. "Agreed, with conditions. You work with our existing communications team, not over them. All messaging aligns with our core commitment to actual change, not just image management. And you report directly to me with any concerns about Reed's countermoves." "Agreed," she said promptly. "I'll be at headquarters in 30 minutes. And Eliza? Reed called me this morning, tried to recruit me to his side." My breath caught. "What did you tell him?" "That I back winners," she said with characteristic bluntness. "And that scorched earth tactics might feel satisfying but rarely serve long-term interests." After we disconnected, I stood by the window, watching the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the city. 24 hours ago, I had been executing the final phases of my takeover plan. Now I was deep in the complex reality of leadership, addressing threats, building alliances, making decisions that would affect hundreds of lives. A notification appeared on my tablet. Vivian had forwarded Reed's messages attempting to recruit her to his retribution campaign. Another puzzle piece falling into place, another strand in the web of information I was weaving to protect both the company and my position within it. I reflected on how differently each of my siblings had responded to this seismic shift. Marcus, with rage and threats, unable to conceive of a reality where his dominance was not assured. Reed with calculated sabotage, attempting to destroy what he could no longer control. And Vivian with pragmatic adaptation, realigning herself with the new power center while negotiating position. None had responded with genuine reflection about the behaviors that had led to this moment. The years of dismissal, the intentional marginalization, the final cruel abandonment on the mountain. Perhaps such reflection would come with time. Perhaps it never would. My thoughts were interrupted by Angela announcing Riley Zhang's arrival. She entered carrying a slim portfolio containing her resume and proposal as requested. "I've taken the liberty of structuring my contributions around 3 critical aspects of the transition," she began, professional and prepared. "Regulatory navigation, stakeholder education, and compliance system design." As she outlined her ideas, each thoughtful, well-researched, and aligned with our objectives, I watched her transformation from Reed's invisible assistant to a confident professional advocating for her expertise. Another person stepping into their full capability now that the shadow of old hierarchies had lifted. "This is excellent work, Riley," I said when she finished. "I'd like you to join our core transition team, effective immediately. Angela will help you transition your current responsibilities and establish your new role." Her carefully maintained professional demeanor cracked slightly, genuine emotion breaking through. "Thank you for the opportunity. I won't disappoint you." "I know you won't," I replied. "But remember, the standard isn't pleasing me. It's advancing our mission. That's the fundamental difference in how we'll operate moving forward." After she left, I turned back to the window, watching the city lights begin to illuminate against the darkening sky. The day had been a series of challenges met, alliances formed, threats neutralized. Yet the most profound shift wasn't in these external circumstances, but in how I moved through them, with confidence rooted not in position or power, but in purpose. They had abandoned me in the cold, thinking isolation would break me. Instead, it had crystallized my resolve, clarified my vision, and catalyzed the transformation not just of my role, but of the entire company culture. The path ahead remained challenging. Reed's counteroffensive, market skepticism, the complex logistics of industrial transformation. But for perhaps the first time in my professional life, I faced these challenges not as the overlooked younger sibling seeking validation, but as a leader secure in her vision and values. I picked up my father's stone paperweight from my desk, feeling its solid weight in my palm. Unshakable. Not because circumstances would never threaten to destabilize me, but because I had found my center of gravity in something stronger than external validation or family approval. The quiet ones do see furthest, especially when they've been underestimated long enough to develop vision that others lack. 3 months transformed Chen Innovations more dramatically than the previous decade. The headquarters building itself reflected this evolution. Living walls of native plants now softened the stark lobby. Solar arrays gleamed on the rooftop, and the previously unused courtyard had become a thriving community garden, tended by employees during lunch breaks. Even the air felt different, charged with purpose rather than mere ambition. I stood in this garden on a bright October morning, exactly 1/4 since the night my siblings had abandoned me at the mountain cabin. Kneeling beside me, Riley, Zhang pointed out the sustainable irrigation system she'd helped design, which captured rainwater and reduced consumption by 70%. The facilities team wants to implement similar systems at all our manufacturing plants, she explained, brushing soil from her hands. They've already completed feasibility studies for the Portland and Austin locations. I smiled, noting how seamlessly Riley had transitioned from executive assistant to one of our most valuable sustainability coordinators. Her natural leadership and environmental expertise had quickly earned her respect throughout the organization. Respect Reed had never bothered to notice she deserved. Green Summit called this morning, I told her as we walked back toward the building. They're impressed. With our implementation timeline, we're ahead of schedule on 4 of the 6 major transition milestones. Riley's expression brightened. The EPA regional director mentioned something similar during yesterday's site visit. She said most companies take years to achieve what we've done in months. Most companies don't have the motivation we do, I observed. Nothing accelerates innovation like necessity. And necessity had certainly driven our transformation. Reed's threatened exposure of past environmental shortcuts had indeed materialized, but our preemptive disclosure and comprehensive remediation plan had transformed potential disaster into a case study in corporate accountability. Rather than appearing as reluctant violators, we'd emerged as leaders in transparent environmental governance. The elevator whisked us to the executive floor, which had undergone its own revolution. Gone were the imposing closed doors and hierarchical layout. The new open design featured collaborative spaces, transparent meeting rooms, and a central hub where employees from all departments could share ideas informally. Angela met me with her usual efficiency, tablet in hand. The quarterly board meeting is confirmed for 10 a.m., all members attending either in person or virtually. Green Summit's representatives just arrived and are waiting in the conference center. Thank you. And the other matter? Her expression softened slightly. The industrial auction closing was finalized this morning. Chen Manufacturing's former headquarters is officially sold to Meridian Sustainable Development. The conversion to affordable green housing begins next month. I nodded, absorbing this final severing of ties to the old regime. The obsolete manufacturing facility, Reed's pride and Marcus's operational fortress, would now provide energy-efficient housing for 200 families. The transformation felt poetically appropriate. Reed's attorney called again, Angela added, her tone carefully neutral. They're requesting reconsideration of the non-compete provisions. Forward the request to legal with the same response as before. The terms were clear and the agreement signed voluntarily. As Angela departed, Vivian appeared in the doorway of my office, elegant as ever, in a tailored suit, the same shade of green that had become our company's signature color. Despite my initial reservations, her 3-month consulting role had proven valuable. Her skill at crafting narratives had helped position our transformation as visionary rather than reactive. Ready for your star turn? She asked, studying me with her characteristic directness. The journal reporter arrived early. She's particularly interested in the stock performance since the transition. 42% growth in 3 months. Speaks for itself, I replied, gathering the presentation materials for the board meeting, though I prefer to focus on our sustainability metrics rather than just financial outcomes. Vivian smiled slightly. The beauty is that you don't have to choose. The market has validated what you've been saying for years. Environmental responsibility and profitability aren't opposing forces. We walked together toward the conference center, our relationship now defined by professional respect rather than familial obligation. The consulting arrangement had proven an elegant solution, allowing the company to benefit from Vivian's undeniable talents while maintaining appropriate boundaries after the betrayal. I'm finalizing my report next week, she said, referring to the comprehensive communications strategy she'd developed for our ongoing transition. Riley's team has offered some excellent insights on stakeholder engagement for Phase 2. Will you stay on for implementation? I asked, genuinely curious about her plans. Vivian hesitated, uncharacteristically uncertain. I've received several offers, 2 from competitors hoping I'll bring insight into your methods, 3 from sustainability-focused firms impressed with how we've positioned the transition. And what are you considering? Actually, she said, stopping before we reached the conference room doors, I'm thinking of starting my own communications firm specializing in sustainability messaging. There's growing demand from companies trying to navigate authentic environmental positioning without greenwashing. I studied my sister, noting how the past months had changed her. The sharp edges remained, but there was new purpose behind her ambition, substance beneath the style. That sounds like an excellent fit for your talents, I said honestly. We could be your first client, if you wanted. Surprise flickered across her face. You'd trust me with that after everything? I'd trust your professional expertise with appropriate contractual boundaries, I clarified. Business relationships can be valuable even when personal ones require distance. She nodded, accepting both the opportunity and its limitations. I'll send a formal proposal next week. The boardroom hummed with anticipatory energy when we entered. Executives, board members, and key investors gathered around the expansive table, while screens displayed remote participants. My mother sat near the far end, her expression composed but attentive. In the 3 months since the leadership change, Eliza Chen had maintained careful neutrality, neither opposing nor explicitly endorsing my direction, but watching with increasingly evident respect. Akira Tanaka from Green Summit nodded in, greeting, her presence a visible reminder of the partnership that had enabled our rapid transformation. Beside her sat Mr. Patterson, our family attorney whose early support had proven invaluable. I took my place at the head of the table, not with the nervous determination I'd felt 3 months ago, but with the quiet confidence of demonstrated results. Thank you all for joining us for this first quarterly review of Chen Innovations. Sustainability transformation, I began, activating the presentation display. Rather than beginning with financial performance, though those numbers are exceptional, I want to start with our environmental impact metrics. The room's energy shifted subtly, this departure from traditional reporting sequence itself a statement about our values. I guided them through the compelling data. 34% reduction in carbon emissions across all operations, 61% decrease in water usage, 47% less landfill waste. These improvements aren't just environmental wins, I continued, transitioning to the business impact slides. They've translated directly to operational efficiency, cost reduction, and market differentiation. The financial data appeared next, telling a story more powerful than even I had anticipated. Record growth in both revenue and profit margins, stock price outperforming industry averages by double digits, new client acquisition exceeding projections by 28%. Most significantly, I noted, highlighting a particularly striking graph, Our employee engagement metrics have reached their highest levels in company history. Turnover has decreased by 62%, while submissions have increased by 87%. I paused, allowing the comprehensive success story to resonate before addressing the transformation journey itself. 3 months ago, many viewed our pivot to sustainability as idealistic at best, reckless at worst. Today, it stands validated, not just by market performance, but by every meaningful metric of business health and environmental responsibility. I looked around the table, making eye contact with each participant. This isn't just a strategic shift. It's a fundamental realignment of our company with the future economy, one where environmental stewardship and business excellence are inseparable. The presentation concluded with our forward-looking plans: expansion of sustainable product lines, further operational improvements, and an ambitious carbon-neutral target for all facilities within 18 months. The response was immediate and enthusiastic. Board members who had initially expressed skepticism now competed to voice their support. Investors inquired about accelerating certain initiatives. The Wall Street Journal reporter scribbled notes, frantically, occasionally looking up with barely concealed amazement. As the formal meeting transitioned to smaller discussion groups, my mother approached, her expression thoughtful. "Your father would have appreciated the elegance of this transformation," she said, gesturing toward the presentation still displayed on the screens. "Not just the environmental aspects, but how you've executed the change, decisive yet measured, innovative without being reckless." Coming from Eliza Chen, this qualified as effusive praise. "Thank you," I replied simply. "That means a great deal." She nodded, then surprised me by adding, "Reed called me yesterday." My attention sharpened immediately. What did he want? To explain his new venture. He's established a consulting firm specializing in traditional industrial optimization, essentially positioning himself as the anti-sustainability option for companies resistant to change. She shook her head slightly. He wanted my investment. "And your response?" A hint of a smile touched her lips. I told him I only back winners, and the market has spoken rather clearly about which direction represents the future. I couldn't help but smile at her deliberate echo of Vivian's words from months ago. "Marcus hasn't contacted you?" "Not directly. I understand from industry connections that he's joined Westridge as operations director. Apparently, he's promised to help them maintain traditional manufacturing excellence without green distractions." The irony wasn't lost on either of us. My brothers essentially building their new careers in opposition to the very transformation proving so successful. Rather than adapting, they had doubled down on resistance, defining themselves against, rather than for something. "They still don't understand, do they?" I observed. "That this was never about winning some family power struggle. It was about aligning with reality, environmental, economic, and ethical." My mother studied me with unexpected perceptiveness. "Perhaps that's why you succeeded where they couldn't. You were fighting for something larger than yourself." The insight surprised me, coming from a woman who had spent decades prioritizing family hierarchy over broader purpose. Before I could respond, Akira Tanaka approached, bringing our conversation to a natural close. As the board meeting concluded, and attendees dispersed, I found myself drawn back to my office, not from obligation but from a desire for brief solitude to process the morning's success. The quarterly results exceeded even my optimistic projections, validating not just my business strategy, but my environmental convictions. I stood by the window, looking out at the city where 3 generations of Chens had built their legacy. The urban landscape was changing, solar installations dotting rooftops, green spaces reclaiming former industrial zones, electric vehicles increasingly visible on the streets below. Our company was both responding to and accelerating this evolution. A gentle knock interrupted my reflection. Riley entered carrying a small package. "This was just delivered for you," she said, setting it on my desk. Security screened it already. I thanked her, curious about the unmarked parcel. Inside, I found a smooth stone similar to the paperweight my father had left me, but darker, with veins of quartz running through its surface. A note accompanied it, handwritten in unfamiliar script. From the summit of Granite Peak, where clarity comes to those willing to endure the climb. The mountain taught you what your family couldn't. Park Ranger Thomas Jenkins. I turned the stone in my hand, momentarily transported back to that cold night in the cabin, the betrayal still fresh, the future uncertain. The ranger who had occasionally maintained the property must have heard about what happened, perhaps from my siblings, perhaps from media coverage of the subsequent company transformation. His gesture touched me unexpectedly. The mountain had indeed been my teacher, though not in the way my siblings had intended. They had abandoned me there hoping to break my spirit. Instead, they had freed me from the constraints of seeking their approval. I placed the new stone beside my father's on my desk, the visual metaphor not lost on me. Different journeys, different teachers, both contributing to the foundation upon which I now stood. The afternoon brought a series of meetings focused on our next phase initiatives, the launch of our Sustainable Materials Research Center, expansion of our renewable energy infrastructure, and the community impact program that would provide green technology training for workers transitioning from traditional manufacturing sectors. Each project reflected not just environmental commitment, but a deeper understanding of how business could serve multiple bottom lines simultaneously: financial, environmental, and social. The executives leading these initiatives spoke with genuine passion, their presentations devoid of the political positioning that had characterized the previous regime's meetings. By late afternoon, as I reviewed implementation timelines with our expanded sustainability team, I realized what felt most different about the company now: the absence of fear as a motivating force. Under Reed and Marcus, employees had been driven by anxiety about failure, about disappointing demanding leaders, about losing position in the competitive internal hierarchy. Now, purpose provided the primary motivation. People worked with intensity, not from fear of consequences, but from belief in consequences, the meaningful impact of their contributions on the company, the environment, and the communities we served. As the workday concluded, I made my way to the company garden once more. The late afternoon sun bathed the space in golden light, employees gathering to tend plots or simply enjoy the tranquil environment before heading home. This simple space symbolized our transformation as powerfully as any financial chart, living proof that seemingly small changes could create flourishing ecosystems where once there had been only sterile corporate landscape. Ms. Chen? A young engineer approached somewhat tentatively. I just wanted to thank you personally for approving the Advanced Materials Research Team. We've been wanting to explore biodegradable alternatives for years, but the previous leadership didn't see the potential, I finished for him. He nodded. They called it speculative and unproven. But we've already developed a prototype that performs better than our petroleum-based product, while biodegrading completely within 6 months. That's excellent work, Jason. Make sure Riley's team has the documentation for our next sustainability report. As he walked away with new confidence, I reflected on how many similar innovations had likely been suppressed under the old regime. Valuable ideas dismissed because they challenged established methods or required investment in unfamiliar technologies. My phone vibrated with a notification. The Wall Street Journal article had been published online ahead of tomorrow's print edition. The headline made me smile. The Green Chen Revolution: How One Executive's Environmental Vision Transformed a Traditional Manufacturer. The piece was surprisingly personal, framing the company's transformation through the lens of my journey from overlooked sustainability advocate to transformative CEO. While it mentioned the family leadership transition that had precipitated the change, It focused primarily on the business and environmental outcomes rather than the dramatic circumstances. One quote from an anonymous employee particularly resonated. Under previous leadership, environmental initiatives were treated as necessary evils, compliance costs to be minimized. Under Eliza Chen, there are core strategy and greatest market advantage. The difference isn't just in policy but in perspective, seeing opportunity where others saw only obligation. As I tucked my phone away, I noticed Mr. Patterson approaching, his expression suggesting purpose rather than casual conversation. Eliza, do you have a moment? There's something you should know. We found a quiet corner of the garden, the ambient sounds of flowing water and conversation providing privacy without isolation. Reed has been making inquiries about the mountain property, he said without preamble. Specifically, about ownership transfer procedures. I frowned slightly. The cabin belongs to the family trust. No single member can transfer it. Correct. But he's been researching easements, access rights, adjacent land parcels. I believe he may be trying to acquire surrounding property to effectively control access to the cabin. The strategic maneuver was classic Reed. If he couldn't own the property outright, he would find ways to control it indirectly. What puzzled me was his motivation. The cabin itself, while holding sentimental value, had limited financial worth compared to other family assets. He wants to reclaim the narrative, I realized aloud. The mountain represents the turning point, where he lost control, where everything changed. He's trying to symbolically reverse that moment. Mr. Patterson nodded. That's my assessment, as well. I've taken the liberty of placing a conservation easement filing on the adjacent parcels through the Chen Family Foundation. It would prevent development and ensure the natural setting remains protected, regardless of who technically owns the access routes. I smiled at his foresight. Thank you, Charles. That's exactly the right approach. As he departed, I contemplated this latest development. Even now, Reed was fighting the last battle, trying to control the physical location where his power had begun to unravel, unable to accept that the transformation had moved far beyond any single place or moment. The sun was setting as I finally left headquarters, casting long shadows across the city. Instead of driving directly home, I found myself drawn to the waterfront park where my father had often taken me as a child. We would sit on a particular bench overlooking the harbor, and he would point to the cargo ships, explaining how each carried materials that would eventually become part of someone's daily life. That's the magic of manufacturing, Eliza, he would say. We transform raw potential into practical possibility. The bench was still there, weathered but sturdy. I sat where he had so often sat, watching boats move across the darkening water, lights beginning to twinkle along the shoreline. In the distance, I could see our company's main manufacturing facility, now crowned with wind turbines that caught the last rays of sunlight. Raw potential into practical possibility. Wasn't that exactly what we were doing now? Taking the raw potential of sustainable practices and transforming them into practical business reality? The fundamental magic my father had recognized hadn't changed. Only the materials and methods had evolved to meet a changing world. My phone buzzed with a text from Riley. EPA just confirmed. Our emissions reduction qualifies for the federal green manufacturing credits. Additional $3. 2M for next quarter's sustainability investments. Another piece of validation, another step forward on the path we were forging. I texted back a brief thanks, making a mental note to ensure the achievement was properly celebrated with the team responsible. As darkness settled completely, I remained on the bench, feeling a profound sense of alignment between past and future, personal and professional, challenge and purpose. The journey from that cold night on the mountain to this moment had been neither straight nor simple, but its direction had been true. My siblings had abandoned me in the wilderness, thinking isolation would break me. Instead, It had revealed my true strength. Not the driven ambition that characterized the Chen family. Legacy, but something quieter and ultimately more powerful. The persistence to stand for what matters, even when standing alone. They had tried to erase me from the company narrative, making me invisible in meetings, dismissing my expertise, ultimately leaving me behind both figuratively and literally. In doing so, they had inadvertently freed me to write an entirely new story, not just for myself, but for the hundreds of people who now contributed to our shared vision. I finally rose from the bench as stars appeared overhead, feeling a sense of gratitude that surprised me with its intensity. Gratitude not despite the betrayal, but in some ways because of it. That painful catalyst had burned away hesitation and accommodation, revealing the leader I had always had the potential to become. The company's transformation had been dramatic, from struggling traditional manufacturer to thriving sustainable innovation leader in just 3 months. But the more profound transformation had been internal, from seeking external validation to finding internal clarity, from accommodating others' limitations to manifesting authentic vision. As I drove home through the city, I passed a digital billboard displaying our company's new slogan against a backdrop of pristine wilderness, innovation rooted in responsibility. The words resonated beyond marketing. They had become our actual operating principle, the standard against which we measured every decision. My apartment welcomed me with its familiar comfort, but even this space had evolved over the past months. What had once been a refuge from familial disappointment had become a place of creation and forward momentum. The dining table was covered with sustainable material samples. Bookshelves now held environmental business case studies alongside my long-standing fiction collection. The walls displayed photography from our newly protected conservation lands. I moved to the small balcony overlooking the city lights, breathing in the cool night air. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, scaling our sustainability initiatives, navigating changing regulations, continuing to prove that environmental leadership and business success were complementary rather than competing priorities. But tonight, I allowed myself to simply appreciate the journey. From the frightened, angry woman abandoned on a mountain to the centered, purposeful leader transforming an industry. From seeking a place at a table where I wasn't welcome to building a new table where everyone's contributions were valued. My siblings had left me stranded after our fight, thinking they were teaching me to stay in my place. Instead, they had taught me that my place was far beyond the limitations they had tried to impose, at the forefront of necessary change, leading not from domination, but from vision. By morning after that fateful abandonment, I had indeed bought their company and removed them from their positions. But the true victory wasn't in that dramatic reversal of fortune. It was in transforming what they had viewed as merely a family business into something with genuine purpose and positive impact. They had tried to make me small. Instead, they had made me mighty, not through cruelty or revenge, but through the clarity that comes only when you've been forced to stand alone and discover you are more than enough. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen.